So let's talk about the problem of human trafficking. It's a huge, huge worldwide problem affecting somewhere between 37 and 46 million people around the world. The first step is to become aware of the problem, right? You know, I wasn't doing anything with human trafficking because I wasn't aware that it was a problem that might be impacting people sitting in the pews in front of me on Sunday morning, or at the time I was living up in Crawford County, and I'm a community kind of guy, and so I was connected to 6 or 7 other organizations, and as I was building those connections and working out, I start looking at them and thinking, wow, as I learned about human trafficking, I thought, these are people that I know that either could know somebody or could know somebody with the potential to be trafficked. I'm aware of the problem. My goal today is, at the end of the day, you're more aware of what this, so that you'll want to do what I've done, maybe not in the way I've done it. And then you have to learn. I'm aware of a problem. You know, it doesn't do any good to solve a problem with solutions that don't work. So you really have to learn about that particular the problem. You have to learn about the people that are in it. You know, what is practicing empathy? What is doing unto others as you would have them do unto you if you were in their place? You have to be able to put yourself in their perspective. So when I'm out here in rural Pennsylvania, I share stories about when I lived in Erie, Pennsylvania, or I spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They are like living in 2 different countries. Or I share a story with people about what it's like. You know, I get people that will talk about Russians as if they're all this really terrible people, right? I'll never forget. Years ago, my home church in Beaver Falls, Concord United Methodist Church, John Smith was a pastor, and he was invited to go to Russia. There was a connection to the church. They were going, they were invited to adopt an orphanage, right? And so they went and they chose this orphanage, and they came home, and it was a special needs orphanage, and we'll talk about orphans a couple of times throughout the day. But they wanted this particular orphanage because it was a special needs orphanage. Unlike many of the orphanages in Russia, it had, and so they're telling this story, and they're showing pictures of Russian kids, and there was 2 older ladies sitting about 3/4 of the way back from the hall. In the hall, we were doing the presentation, and they did one of those. I call it the old lady whisper. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's the people that are hard of hearing that whisper so that you can hear them 3 counties over. My mother and my dad had terrible hearing, and if he didn't have his hearing aids, he'd say, you know, well, that's what they did. And I'll never forget what they said, though. They look just like American kids. And I went, duh. So eventually I've made trips to Russia, and I've spent time with those kids, and I've taken other people with me, and I've made friends. One of the interpreters, I consider her my good friend. I've watched her blossom and have 3 kids, and you know, and I can remember we were walking down the street, her and I were walking down some market. She was helping me find something, and we started talking about the impact of the relations between the United States and Russia. I learned a Russian perspective, not from Moscow, but 4 hours east in a place that looks really like Venango, Clarion, and Crawford County. You have to learn. You have to put yourself there. What's it like to be trafficked? And then ask that question. I'm going to keep coming back to this question over and over again. What can I do? What can I do to make a difference? And who do I know that can help? Part of that is looking at the history. What's the history behind this problem? You know, oftentimes we don't know. Those of us that are pastors, we get to churches and we're made aware of a problem. I'm a United Methodist pastor. Let me tell you, the difficulty in being a United Methodist pastor is, depending on who the bishop is, we move so much, we don't get boxes unpacked most of the time. All right? As a matter of fact, you'll laugh, but I have a briefcase up here with some stuff in it I'm going to use. I went down the basement looking for something I could pull those stuff, bring stuff with me today, and I found stuff from 3 moves ago, still tagged on the outside of the briefcase. It means I haven't used it in all that time, but I might need it, and I'm using it today. But what do we do? We move and we come in and somebody, this is what almost always happens. Somebody comes and makes us aware of a problem. And they oftentimes want to be part of the solution. But boy, this old guy has learned, I better learn the history behind that problem. I better learn what it is, not only the history, what are the roots of that problem? See, what are the roots of, what's the history of human trafficking? The truth is, we've been trafficking people almost since the Garden of Eden. It's not a new problem. It's not one, but we can address it. But you better know what the roots of it are. And what's the roots of trafficking in your community? And the question we always need to be asking is, who profits? Who benefits from this? If this is really a problem, who benefits? Who benefits from human trafficking? Now, if you were here at the beginning of the day, I asked a question. How many slaves do you have working for you? And we don't want to put our hands up, right? Then I tell you that according to that website, I have 67 working for me. Well, the first time I ran through that was eye-opening. So who profits from human trafficking? I do. So do you. And the challenge is, you can pretend it's not a problem and ignore it. And then you don't have to be vulnerable enough to think you're part of the problem. And with any problem, I like to throw this in there. You have to expect the unexpected. I can't tell you, as I've been working through this, as I'm talking to folks in government, and I'm talking to police officers and people in the judicial system, as I talk with all of them, this is a complex problem. And I keep getting the unexpected thrown at me. Well, have you thought about this part of it? No, that's something else to look at. Now, for those of you here in the sanctuary, over on this side room, there's a table out there with some of the books that I've collected about human trafficking in the last 15 months. I don't know, there's probably 50 books out there. No, I have not read all of them yet. I've probably read half of them, and I've referred to many of them. Some of them just came, one of them just came a couple days ago, and I haven't even opened it up yet. So, but when you look across that table, you're going to see 2 kinds of books. You're going to see a ton of books that are about the problem of human trafficking. The other thing you're going to see is books that I didn't bring many of with, where I spend the majority of my time, and that is, how do I address some of the things that make need for people to want to be bought? So think about what I just said. How do I address needs for people that are bought. We'll talk about that. Who's profiting from this? In the United States, forced labor, exploitation, about $43 billion. Domestic servitude, those are the maids and the people that work in nannies and all kinds of stuff. And you know, I have to admit, I have a friend on Facebook that I you know, I met somewhere along the line and know her parents a little better than I do her. And she announced one day she was moving to Florida to become a nanny. And I went, now, it turned out it was an okay situation for her, but wow, the potential for an 18-year-old girl to be moving into a situation she's not really sure of. I'll admit, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought about that a second time. Sexual exploitation, $99 billion. It is a huge part of our industry. Who? Labor trafficking, about 60% are men, 40% are women. That number flexes, but there are more men labor trafficked than women. Completely the opposite in the sexual industry. There's a few men, about 98% though, the impact is women. We're going to talk about why that is. It's because of who buys. Little hint on where we're headed. And who's most at risk? Our kids. We're going to talk a lot today about vulnerability. Who's most vulnerable? You know, this is an older graphic. I updated some of the numbers, but there are huge places that trafficked people are being moved across. It is, and many, especially in the sex industry, are far younger than you can imagine. You're gonna hear me say this again. Most of the girls that are lured into sex industry are between 13 and 17 years old. That's kind of an introduction to human trafficking. That's my background research into human trafficking. And out of that, I've been looking at tons of resources, and I've divided up our work into 3 parts: prevention, intervention, and restoration. So how do we prevent human trafficking? I want to start this part of the presentation with a video. This one's a little bit longer. It's a story of a young lady who was on the verge of being sold. Now, as you listen to this story, as she tells her story and interacts, I want you to practice empathy. You're gonna want to make some snap judgments and assumptions that may or may not be true. You notice I didn't, may or may not, because sometimes our assumptions are correct, right? Our judgments are right, but sometimes they're not. But ask as each character in this story is introduced. This piece comes from Shared Hope International, a group out west. They've given me permission to use any of their material to share this story, and this story is an interesting one. Let's listen to her story.
working with what we have. And I was like, what do we have? And she's like, your body.
I didn't know about sex trafficking until I was in the middle of it.
After a while, you just kind of get used to it. Like everything that goes around just doesn't seem out of ordinary to you.
We really believed that she was getting ready to be sold.
So, Brianna, how old are you?
5 and a kid's taking a while. Let me join in!
Whenever you're missing kids.
I think the most common way we've seen these traffickers or pimps get involved in these girls' lives is they pretend to be an older boyfriend. And really, again, we're talking about young girls that could be 12, 13, 14 years old, and perhaps they've never had a boyfriend. So to have this older male come into their life who's pretty charming, who's pretty charismatic, and suddenly paying attention to them like they've never had it before, offering to buy them things, offering to take them to dinner, to movies, have their hair done, their nails done, a tanning salon. This connection's made, and these young girls actually fall in love with these guys and believe that this guy loves them back. And then one day he asks for something, and even though she doesn't want to do it, she's so worried about losing him that she will. And once he's had her do it once, he pretty much can control her from then on through shame, through drugs, through threats about family or physical beatings. But the reality is it can be any girl. And we've learned that through experience, unfortunately, that girls from good homes, girls that have good grades, do all the right things can still be exposed to this. The 17-year-old girl that I'm familiar with, her name is Brianna. And Brianna comes from a small town, was an A student, an athlete, volunteered in her community, was a cheerleader, and attended college while going to high school. And she came into my life through a phone call I received on a Saturday night.
My name is Brianna, and I didn't know about sex trafficking until I was in the middle of it. I'm sure you're like me, where you think that sex trafficking wouldn't affect your life, but I'll tell you my story. I was from a small town and just really enjoyed being a part of the community. When I was in high school, I actually took college courses because I knew that I wanted to be a nurse. I was really excited about getting my education started, and I knew that I could really focus myself while I was in high school to get those A's I needed in college. I was waitressing and just doing a good job. I was always really friendly and would have conversations with my customers. What I didn't realize was that one of my customers, he was gathering information about me through our innocent conversations, where I was going to school, what my family was like, what I wanted to be. He was gathering information about me to eventually use it against me. I was just at work one evening, and some guys came in, and they were really cool. One, his name was Nick, and he was like 24. He played football at a university. He was tall and blonde, and he was super funny. We were just like laughing the entire time that he was having his meal. He told me that he was from Seattle, which I thought was just a coincidence. And I told him that, wow, I want to move there. And we were just flirting the whole time, and he was telling me how beautiful I am and making me feel good about myself. At the end of the conversation with Nick, he gave me his phone number, and we talked for quite a bit of time. I made a choice that night, but I found out that they actually had chosen me. When I decided to go up and hang out with Nick in Seattle, I couldn't tell my parents because they wouldn't let me. So since he was older, I had to make a lie to get around my parents. So I told them that I was going to hang out with my girlfriend for the day. When I got to Seattle, I pulled up to a gorgeous house. It was Victorian style and it had a lake view. I was blown away. I didn't realize that when I was meeting his friends, they were actually shopping me. And they were seeing if they wanted to buy me or if they knew somebody that might want to buy me. So I didn't realize that his friends were traffickers too. And he was so smooth and came off so sincere and genuine. When I asked him, how am I gonna get a job? What am I gonna do? He said, you could waitress, you're good at that. I saw you waitressing, you're good at that. But how much do you usually make in a night? And I told him that I usually make about $85. He told me to put a 0 on that 85, and that's how much I could bring in a night with a job that he knew of. He told me that his ex-girlfriend was a dancer and that it was really easy and that I could probably do it. And for a minute I considered dancing. I was thinking, well, probably isn't that bad. And then he said, okay, let's go to the strip club. I felt like if I didn't go to the strip club with him, that he would look at me as just a child, as a kid. Here I am, I'm 18. I can go into a strip club at this point. And it was kind of like, if you don't, then you're not an adult. That's how I felt. The strip club was just really loud and dark. It was gross and it smelled. It didn't feel very comfortable, and it's like everything has this like sticky look to it. You don't really want to touch anything because everything's got germs on it. I felt kind of gross that I was even in there. I was only in the club for 2 nights dancing, but in that time frame, a lot of guys wanted to take me home. And one guy, he offered me $1,000 for an hour, and I couldn't believe it. So me and Nick talked about going to Arizona, and we both decided that I needed to return my dad's car. On my way to return my dad's car, I was calling friends to help me move out and get the car returned and then get me back up to Seattle. So the only friend that offered to help was my ex-boyfriend, and his name was Evan. I was surprised that he was going to help, but we just kept a really close relationship. We were good friends still. So when I got to his house, though, he was asking me so many questions. Evan was so concerned about where did they get all this money and why aren't they working? He was asking just these questions, and I was starting to realize that he didn't really want to help me. And then I realized that he was trying to talk me out of going to Arizona and moving out. And so I wanted to go. I wanted to leave. So on my way of walking out of Evan's door, his parents were there. I felt like Evan betrayed me because he called his parents and my parents to try to help convince me not to go to Arizona and not to move out. And, here I am, given all these opportunities to go to school in Seattle. I felt like it was a dream come true. I was going to Arizona for winter break, and they all didn't see it. I felt like my family and Evan They wanted to keep me just in this little bubble and that I'm just a child and I don't really know what I'm doing. So I was upset. I was really mad at Evan. I felt like he completely was ruining our friendship. He had lost my trust. And a woman walked into the room and introduced herself. Her name was Linda Smith, and she was a specialist in getting girls to recognize and flee from human trafficking. After a long conversation with Linda, I started realizing and recognizing that I was being groomed for trafficking, that I was in the middle of the process, and that it was almost too late. I thought Nick was the good guy and Evan was the bad guy, but now I realized he saved my life. Nick was grooming me to be trafficked. I started getting angry and upset. Linda, from all the stories that she was telling me, she told me one about a 13-year-old girl who was tricked on the night of her birthday.
Monday through Friday, never wanted to miss school. I love school. I love being around my friends, and my science class was my big thing. We were walking down the street, coming back from the little corner store, and there was these white guys out there, saying, yeah, there's a party. You guys should really come, and you guys would have fun. We were like, okay, well, we're going into 8th grade. We might as well get our first party out. Let's just go have fun. It was just a quiet neighborhood. And so we were like, it's cool. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? So we were like, yeah, this is harmless. It's one of those ones you see in a movie. It was fun. And I was sitting on the couch just listening to music. My friends were off dancing and stuff. And some really cute guy comes up and starts talking to me. And I'm just sitting there. He was really persistent on talking to me and trying to get to know me. He was 20, 23 or something like that. I was at Starbucks ordering a drink and he had said, hey, do you remember me? And I was like, nope, sorry, nope, don't remember you. And he's like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure I remember you. I was like, okay, whatever. So I gave him my number and we talked for a little bit and hang out. And we'd go to movies and malls, trips and stuff like that. And it was pretty cool. I'd never had a boyfriend before. So it was cool. He bought me a dress and it was just really special to me. It was I felt like I was a princess, a queen or something. And he used to call me his queen. I started thinking, he really did like me, and listening to all the dreams he was trying to sell. He wants to marry me and stuff like that. And he can't wait for us to move in together and have a life. He kept saying that he needed money and he was going to lose his cars and his house and stuff, and he's not going to have anywhere to go. So I was like, I'll help you, whatever. And so we went to the strip club, and it was just super uncomfortable. So I went out of the room and he started yelling at me and I was like, I'm not doing that. I want to go home. And he wouldn't let me go home till my shift was over. I was 13 when I started in the strip clubs. I signed up for track, and during track, I'd just kind of not go, and I'd go spend them with him or whatever. And then I started going to strip clubs for him, and what I'd do is we'd go to school on the bus, and then right when I got off the bus, I'd just kind of leave and go meet him down the street or something. And then just as the buses were pulling up, I'd be back on the bus, so it was I went to school. And I'd leave for weekends saying I'm at my friend's house, and whenever my mom would call on my friend's phone, we'd just three-way call it so it sounded like we were together because, my friends would cover for me. I was on the phone with him and he was cussing me out, saying, he didn't know why I even bothered with school. I wasn't going to be anything because that's who I am. and like I hung up the phone and I like kind of dropped a couple tears. And I had this friend, Jordan, and she was like, you know, why would you believe somebody saying that they love you when they treat you? And I really didn't have an answer for that back then. He loves me. That's all I could really think in my head. And that night, my first night, I got in the car with 3 people. They were all like in their 40s and 50s, maybe older. Like, I don't know, I puked for about 30 minutes. Most of like my tricks and stuff were kind of old. I was scared, I was nervous. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't come back without any money. He's kind of a very physical kind of person. He, like, you mess up something, he'll slap you, or, you know, depending on what you did, he'll, like, choke you out.
They were threatening to go get her 10-year-old sister. They were threatening to go beat up her family. And they had taken video of Lacey being raped the first night and threatened that they were going to use video of her having sex with other men to show to her youth group and to show to her school. She wouldn't have felt like she belonged anywhere. She didn't feel like she belonged with her pimp, but she wasn't safe going home. I just didn't know about trafficking and that there were older men preying on teenagers to bring them to a market, to sell them. Traffickers go anywhere that there's a large group of girls or that girls frequent, like the mall or Starbucks. They'll go to arcades, anywhere that teenagers like to hang out at, parks, restaurants. Signs that you can watch out for your friends would be small tattoos or a tattoo of a name. Maybe your friend has an older boyfriend that she's trying to keep a secret. Or she has new clothes that are really expensive, like a $300 purse or a really nice jacket. If your friend asks you to cover for her, don't do it. You're not doing her a favor. You could be helping her destroy her own life. And just like her, you don't know that what she's doing is so dangerous, but you'll never see her again. So what can we do to fight sex trafficking? I think the most important thing that we can do is get the word out. The only way to protect girls from sex trafficking is to be educated on what sex trafficking looks like. If you can't recognize the signs, you're not going to save your friend.
I think Evan was a true defender of Brianna. You know, he took a chance. He stepped out. He told the truth. He told what was going on with her. He violated her trust in the interest of protecting her. And I think that's a good lesson for us. Had he not done that, we might not have Brianna here with us today. I think what's important to understand is that these pimps have studied, preyed upon, stalked these girls. They do know where they live. They do know about their family. And when they threaten these girls don't feel safe. They don't feel that they have the ability to return home. And that was one of the questions we used to struggle with is, if this girl was doing something she didn't want to do, why wouldn't she just leave? And the fact is they can't see the way out of it. They don't see a safe way out of it. I want to make sure that you understand where these guys are at. They're at your malls. They're at your stores. They're at places where kids congregate. Really, probably the biggest key is these older boyfriends. You heard Brianna talking about it. An older, mid-20s male has no business being around 13, 14-year-old girls, or even up to 18-year-old girls. So protect your friends. When we look back at Lacey's friends who really could have intervened at different points in her life and didn't, she's never seen those friends again. So the fact they thought maybe they were protecting her at the time really never helped her, and they've never been around in her life since.
Their website is sharedhope.org. If it's well worth a look. There are other videos. And a little bit later, we're going to see one more video that's the kind of the rest of Brianna's story. But did you notice the final quote? It's one we should all be familiar with. You can pretend that you don't see, but you can never again say you didn't know. Wilberforce. Do you know who that is? He was a man who spoke in England about slavery. And that led to the end of slavery in England. You can pretend that you don't see, but you can never say you didn't know.